Hei sann. Har du noe presentasjon, Solveig?
Nei, jeg har ikke noe presentasjon.
Ok, ja, men det går bra. Skal vi se.
Hallo.
Hei. Hello, and welcome to the NORA.startup webinar on sustainable artificial intelligence. NORA is the Norwegian Artificial Intelligence Research Consortium, consisting of 8 universities, 2 university colleges, and 2 research institutes, aiming to strengthen research, education, and innovation within AI, ML, and robotics. Machine learning, that is. NORA.startup is NORA's innovation network, our main goal being to facilitate closer connection and collaboration between the research and startup environment in Norway within the mentioned fields. Our uniqueness lies in our ties to a large academic network and at the same time focusing on innovation and business. NORA.startup is still in its early days, but it's heading into an exciting developmental phase now with about 15 startup members and around 20 academics. So if you want more information about applying for membership, it's rather simple. You can just follow the link in the chat, and for those listening to this later, you can just go to our website NORA.ai and look for NORA.startup there. Okay, so we have wonderful guests today. We have 2 professors and 1 startup. They will tell a little bit more about themselves soon. We have many questions. We're looking for answers. The participants will present themselves and share some of their experience. And the webinar ends in a plenary discussion on shared interests, challenges, and possibilities, and how we might get even better at sharing to build a vibrant AI startup ecosystem focused on sustainability. First, let's start with a quick round of introductions. I will begin, followed by the introduction of each member. My name is Alex Maltzau, and I will be your host today. I work with AI policy and ethics at NORA. I work to provide an overview of national and international policies relating to the field of artificial intelligence. My educational background is within social data science, combining insight from social theories together with computational methods and data science techniques. I have a background from consulting in KPMG, starting up several organizations, and was the project leader for large co-working space in Oslo. But we have exciting guests, and the first guest I want to introduce to you is Solveig Sæbø. Could you please introduce yourself shortly?
Thank you, Alex. And I'm very excited to be here on this webinar. And I'm also very excited to be here to discuss the topics of sustainability and AI. And my name is Solveig Sæbø. Currently, I'm a pro-rector of education at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, just outside Oslo. And I'm also a professor in statistics. So I have a long background in research and teaching in statistics. And currently, due to my 2 roles, I am in a fortunate position that I can combine both my background in statistics and also my focus on sustainability, which is a very central focus at our university, as well as at many other universities, fortunately. And I am super excited to be here. So I will tell you more about my focus of interest in a short while. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solveig. And the next guest I want to introduce is Laurence Habib.
Hi, so my name is Laurence Habib. I'm a professor in informatics at Oslo Met, Oslo Metropolitan University, so in the center of the city of Oslo. I am also the head of Department of Computer Science at the same university.
Thank you so much, Laurence. And the last presenter and guest today is maybe familiar to you. His name is Thomas Leira from Wake.ai, an exciting startup in Norway.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so I'm co-founder and CEO in Wake. and I'll try to represent the more practical startup perspective to the topic of sustainable AI and how we should be thinking about these problems, I guess. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Thomas. That was short and sweet. So now we're going to hear from Solve Sæbø. Could you tell us a little bit more about your work, Solve?
Yeah, my position now as pro-rector of education at our university. In this position, I also been quite involved in working out the strategy of our university, which has the overarching goal of a joint effort for sustainable future. So sustainability is at the very core at our university, and we have a broad field of science and research topics and education programs covering a quite broad almost every part of the sustainability agenda, the Agenda 2030. So we have, when we worked out our strategy a couple of years ago, we decided that we should try to embrace the whole agenda. So therefore the joint effort for sustainable future became our overarching goal. And this joint effort is also reflecting the importance that we work interdisciplinary in this field, because as I will also come back to a little bit later, probably the SDGs work that the Agenda 2030 is comprised by are very intertwined. They depend on each other. They express a complex entity which we need to address in a what I would call a multivariate manner from a statistical point of view. So that makes the whole sustainability and the global challenges that are dependent on each other so exciting and interesting for me, also from my statistical background, to work to try to figure out a good path towards reaching all the goals within 2030, as is the expressed goal for the Agenda 2030. And to support this overarching goal of a joint effort for sustainable future, we have also pointed out a few areas that we should focus on to support this. And one of these areas is the digitalization. And within that, of course, is also all about data, big data, machine learning, statistics, and of course, artificial intelligence. And not only the technological parts of this, but also the competence that we need in order to be able to exploit all these great opportunities that this technology provides us, and how we can transfer and motivate our students also to be competent in this, because in the future we need creative and technological competent students to work on how we can solve the global challenges we are facing. And artificial intelligence, I mentioned that I'm a statistician, but these areas are quite intertwined as well, and I'm not currently what we could call a hardcore AI researcher, but I have quite many thoughts about AI, which I also have some background in from many years ago, but also how we can relate sustainability to artificial intelligence is one of my heart or core subjects close to my heart at the moment. And in this short kind of introduction, before we start discussing, I would like to kind of address three areas where I think that sustainability and artificial intelligence need to kind of be seen in a context. And one area is how can AI and, for instance, all the machine learning and computational data methods support how we work towards reaching the SDGs? How can they be tools for achieving and speeding up the progress towards reaching the SDGs? At my university, we focus a lot. The Norwegian University of Life Sciences is a fusion of the former agricultural university in Norway and the veterinarian college in Norway. So we focus a lot on life sciences topics. And for instance, within our departments and faculties, there's a huge range of interesting life science applications that could be supported by AI and digitalization in a very nice way. And for instance, if we think about agriculture, we can think about the SDG number 2, where we work towards securing the food supply, for instance. We work on agricultural robotics. How can we use robotics to become more efficient and more environmental friendly in our food production is one area. If we move on to another SDG, SDG 3, on health, we can say that we also can focus on how can AI help us to improve diagnostics and also the availability of diagnostics on the SDG 3. And we have also a group working on, for instance, tumor diagnostics from CT scans to guide and aid the clinic doctors in diagnostics, which is a very important area where I think that, especially an area where I think that AI and human intelligence, in a way, should be benefiting from each other in a close relationship and collaboration. When it comes to other SDGs, the list is so long how AI can support the progress of the Agenda 2030. For instance, we can talk about for SDG 7 on energy, how smart grids can secure efficient energy distribution. When it comes to SDG 5 and 10 about equality and gender equality, how can AI secure maybe better than a human biased mind that we are indeed unbiased. And that is a huge topic in AI now. How can we secure the ethics of and the unbiasedness of AI? And before I quit, the second area I think that AI could be very important is how can AI be used to secure in a broad scale how we reach the Agenda 2030. When we see the complexity and the interdependence of all the goals, maybe AI could, in a better way than human intelligence, pick out those right paths, the right decisions for a sustainable path towards reaching the entire agenda. And I think that is an area where perhaps the research focus is not very pronounced right now. And finally, the last area, which I also addressed in an article in the newspaper, is how can we make AI itself more sustainable? And that I may come back to that later, Alex, because that is also an area where I think that it's very important that we think about how it can deal with some of these huge challenges that the system itself, the computational burden and so on, should be addressed. And that kind of sums up some of my main interests and messages here today, I think. So by that, I think I will send the word back to you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you so much, Solveig. And it's you mentioned a lot of areas, and I think your approach to sustainability is really important in this context of artificial intelligence. Well, on that note, I'll give the word over to Laurence Habib, and she has been addressing this from a wide variety of perspectives, like in NORA equals EU. I mean, you have such a wide range of experiences. So I look very much forward to your presentation. Take it away, Laurence.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thanks for having me. I am going to share my screen, and I hope you can tell me if you can see it.
Yes.
So I would like to start with a Hippocratic oath, first, do not harm. I think that's one of the main reasons why we're here today. If we're going to have sustainable AI, it should be AI that is beneficent and not maleficent. As you mentioned, Alex, we are working at Oslo Metropolitan University on a bunch of areas within the umbrella of North-Star. We are looking at biologically inspired models, at quantum AI. We're looking at security, human factors in AI, and also understandable and explainable models. And as I guess you all know, sustainability is not just environment, although a lot of people think it's only environment. It's also social sustainability and economic sustainability. And as you see, our various areas of investigation in the research group cover all three areas of sustainability. Equals EU, it's an EU-funded research project that we are in at Oslo Met, and it has to do with gender equality. One does not normally think about gender equality as sustainability, but it certainly is. And through partnerships between organizations, between Global North and Global South, we are trying to improve diversity and reduce gaps between genders and between various types of professions and of backgrounds. And now, just to say a few words about Oslo Met. Oslo Metropolitan University is a university for professions. We have nurses, and we have teachers, and we have social workers, and we have journalists and engineers, of course. It calls itself a welfare state university. And one thing that might be interesting for you to know is that we are a 2-year-old university, so we are very, very new at being a university, but then we try to be entrepreneurial. And part of being entrepreneurial was to create a course that was for everyone, a course that we call Technology and Society. When I say everyone, every student at Oslo Met can take it. And we mix the groups of students. So in the same group, you might have a journalist student and a nursing student and a social work student that talk about the same things or the same topics, whether it's social media or robots or other things that are all related to ethics. So it's ethical reflections around technology. And in that course, we are really trying, it's not just AI, but when we talk about AI, we try to get students to think not only on those areas that are implementation and use, which you normally think about when you think about AI in all the other sectors than engineering, but also the design, the training, the development, the whole AI life cycle, and thinking sustainability throughout. And then we try to get the students to think about those models and how much it costs in terms of environmental cost to train the models, and not just to train them, but then as society evolves, the models have to adapt. So we have to tune them in to reshape them. And training a single deep learning model can generate as much CO2 as a total lifetime of 5 cars. And we try to get the students to reflect upon that this energy spent on training a model, maybe it could be better allocated to, for example, heating a family's home. And also to think about the brain is a much, much more efficient way of dealing with information. And could we create models that mimic the brain a little bit more so that we can make them more efficient? And in our research and our teaching, we are adopting the EU's human-centric AI vision. So the EU recognizes that AI is vulnerable to make mistakes and biases. It requires us to minimize the risk of algorithmic discrimination, and that could be across ethnic backgrounds, across genders, across disabilities. And it requires us to put people at the center of the development of AI. The MIT Work of the Future talks about policy areas, and I think it's important for us to think about them both in research and in teaching, because their conclusions are very clear, but we have to invest and innovate in skills and training for everyone, not just for engineers. That will improve job quality for everyone. And then innovation is also at the center of everything we do. And I'm really glad to hear, to be here talking to you who are working in entrepreneurship, because this is definitely the future of AI in order to create more jobs. And then we think not only about sustainable AI, but also about trustworthy AI. Why? Just because trust is so crucial in everything in society, all human groups, in all human economic systems, and also in technology development. Without trust, we wouldn't trust that we wouldn't have our technologies, and we certainly wouldn't use them. And the foundational principles of trustworthy AI is, as I said earlier, it has to be beneficent. It also has to not be maleficent. It has to give us humans autonomy, and it has to implement social justice. And finally, it has to be explicable in order to make AI accountable. So what are the consequences for business value creations for people who are going to work in business and AI? It's a whole lot of things, and it has to do with risk management, it has to do with improving efficiency, but also about your own image, your own branding. If you want your reputation to remain clean, you have to think ahead about what kind of risk you are taking with AI and how to mitigate them. So if I have any advice to give, is to prepare for the unexpected. No startup company ever thought about the consequences of what happens when they become a tech giant. So it's difficult to predict. So just keep your imagination open, and maybe try to integrate in a new paradigm in your thinking, because we have to get away from problem solving. The problems are not easy anymore, if they ever have been. I think we have to address and embrace the fact that the world is messy. the world is embedded, as Solveig was saying. The real-world problem situations, they are very interdisciplinary, they're multifaceted, and we have to accept them as they are and address them as they are. And finally, I would say, like Gary Kasparov and David De Kremer, AI should augment human intelligence and not replace it. That's all for me for the moment. Back to you, Alex.
Okay, thank you so much, Lawrence. That was a wonderful presentation. And we will now hear from our last guest today. That is Thomas Leira from Wake.ai.
Yeah, thanks. I'll get a little bit into what we do in Wake. I'll just mention firstly that my background is from product and business development in Telenor Norway and Telenor Digital, where I was for 6 years, followed by a couple of years in DNVGL, where I also worked on a couple of initiatives that also included elements of machine learning and AI. So I've seen a couple of examples where it can work, and certainly examples where it does not work. And just an observation from me, and that I believe Solveig touched upon also in his sustainable AI blog post, is that for all practical purposes, currently we're still at the stage where narrow AI is the more likely use, and even that is failing in certain practical applications, even where it seems like good ideas to implement. So unless you're one of the tech giants, I think, or working a little bit more towards academics, I still think this is the more likely use of AI in the companies that's in this forum, I'm assuming. So what we did in Vake, we decided quite early to have quite a narrow focus, specifically looking at the maritime domain. And even more specifically, what we do then is to apply machine learning in satellite data, currently that's satellite images, to detect all ships. And we pay particular attention to those that are turning their mandatory trackers off. This is the AIS system, for those who are familiar with that. So just to put it a little bit into perspective, 90% of all the things you see around you have been shipped by sea. The ocean covers more than 2/3 of the world's surface. So it's quite easy to hide the activity you want to perform there. And the ships that are turning their trackers off have a higher likelihood of being engaged in illegal activities, such as illegal fishing, smuggling, and human trafficking, to mention just a few. So for us as a company, the SDG 14 of the UN Sustainable Goals is, which is life below water, and sustainable ocean activity is very close to our hearts. And as a company, we have a couple of core values that helps us guide the choices we make. Specifically in this regard, it's transparency. So we want to make the oceans a more transparent place. Revealing what we call dark activity, that is the ships that are trying to hide what they're doing, as well as accountability. And that goes for these same ships, but I guess it also goes for us as a company, and the model that we build. We might be held accountable to the data that we deliver to our customers. So we've put a bit of, or we're putting effort into thinking about how we as a company contribute to sustainability. But at the same time, as a startup, we desperately need to validate the market size, user needs, and that our business model makes the company profitable, or else we won't exist as the company in a year or even a half a year. So it can be very hard for us to also raise our line of sight longer than the runway that the company has, which I really think is necessary if you want to play a little bit into the dilemmas that I think Lawrence and Solveig is thinking about every day. So to be honest, I'll say we have a stronger relationship to let's say the AI for sustainability perspective that Lawrence mentioned, and not so much the sustainability of AI if you're talking about energy use and how we make our models more efficient. Yeah, before handing it back to the discussion, I'd also like to emphasize the difference between what we can call the tech giants of the world, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and the startup companies that are just trying to find that initial product market fit. I think it makes a lot of sense to provide legislation and even more guidance, or even what's it called, well, guiding or even requirements to the tech giants to play by fair and sustainable rules. For companies, for smaller companies, I hope that it would be possible to find some differentiation between how you manage those companies from a legal perspective as well as an ethics perspective, I think. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Thomas. And I will now call back all the previous speakers into a plenary discussion. And I'm going to start off with a few questions to Solveig, because I saw that you wrote on Twitter, kind of challenging the Nikolai Astrup about the national strategy we have for AI. Did you get any response from him?
I think it's very hard to get these ministers into speech. They are quite picky when it comes to who they answer, but I guess they are quite busy people as well. But no, I didn't quite get an answer, but I hope that he paid attention to my tweet and is thinking about how they can address this in the national strategy for sustainability.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned in our national strategy for AI in one of the first sentences from Nikolai, but maybe we need to, do some more strategizing on this concept.
Yeah.
I mean, so how do Wake AI as a small startup take into account the principles that you outlined in your article? Where do they start? So what should they do?
Wake.
Yes.
Well, I think that my points in my article in the newspaper were addressing much the same topics as Lawrence was talking about here. How can we make more sustainable AI in itself? And my kind of answer to that in this article is to choose another path or choose another direction for AI towards more human-inspired artificial intelligence. Because we know that we humans, we are much more quick learners. We are learning by concepts. We are social learners. We are more top-down learners than AI, which is more or less bottom-up approach, where you learn from data by some award functions. But as humans, we learn from each other. If I tell my child it's illegal to steal, my child should not try it 1,000 times at the mall to figure it out. It learns it quite by just hearing it, right? So, and it's all about this bias control and uncertainty and confidence parts of AI, which is also lacking, I would say. If we could make it more human-like, I think it will also be more sustainable in all ways. Energy consumption, as also Lawrence mentioned, but we are not quite there yet. There is a lot of research needed to set on this path and to reach these goals. So maybe my point is at the time being more addressed to the academia to work this out. How can we make this available to Thomas and these startups? Because it's a little bit ahead of us. But I think that's the right way to go.
That sounds very exciting. Lawrence, do you see any potential collaboration between Oslo Met and NMU to ensure all startups in AI are sustainable as possible? And like, what kind of resources would you build, for Thomas?
I'm not sure how we would.
Resources, or you don't have to build something specifically, or solve something, but maybe how could you address it together? As a collaborative environment.
As a collaborative environment, I think it would be, first of all, I would love to have students learn about one, the products, and two, the processes. I think they would learn a lot from you. So I don't know, we could get a lot from you. What we could bring would be probably different perspectives. Maybe different type of students with different ways of looking, I mean, maybe naive ways of looking at your technology, but then again, it might be a more a way of getting more different humans to look at the technologies and make your technology more human and more human-centric.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. I have a question from the audience for Thomas.
I'll just comment quickly on what Lawrence said. If that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I think that's one of the main things you can do for companies in Norway is educate the students that are coming out of the universities to actually be cognizant and be thinking about these things. That's our machine learning won't be better than the team and the people working on it. So if they bring those perspectives into it, I think that's an incredible contribution in and of itself.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that, Thomas. And I'm just going to hand you the first question from the audience. In your experience, is the current legislation aligned with your abilities to contribute with, say, proof of wrongdoings at sea? So are other disciplines that could benefit from what you can do today ready to do so? So that's the question from the audience. I guess it relates to kind of the combination of the legislative frameworks that exist and like your technical solution, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's this is a very tough question. I mean, for us currently, we're using Earth observation data, right? And that's just that. It's observational data.
Is it from ESA or?
Yeah. So we're starting with the European Space Agency images. They have a history going back 7 years. So there's enormous amounts of data available, and that's what we need to build our model. And we're quite strict in, just to comment a little bit on the points made of sustainability as well. I mean, we're quite strict in, the detections, the model won't be better than the training data you feed it with. So we're quite strict in how we take those data points into our model and then apply to new imagery. But in terms of the question for legislation, I think, we're working with a couple of, let's say, European government agencies to provide them with a better, let's say, picture of what's happening, right? So technically, we're just an information, handing them information, right? And then it's up to them to actually do something about it. And the solutions we build, technically, we're not stopping any illegal fishing. We're just helping make people and organizations and agencies aware of it. So it's more in terms of how you actually are able to go out into into our oceans and actually stop the wrongdoers. That's the harder part, and I think that legislative part is more towards for the government agencies to respond to.
Yeah, it's a multilateral question that can be quite difficult, I guess. But also, I guess, to what we were discussing earlier, your startup idea is based on the research and the open data that has been made available. So, I mean, for these notions of increased sustainability, there is a really important relationship between this research and data that is made available. Especially for AI startups, as kind of these small units to work and to have a way to kind of apply their methods, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. And I really think that's where EU has a very strong point in terms of both being able to do things like they're doing with the European Space Agency, but also in terms of legislation and controlling the tech giants. I think it's one of the few, let's say, institutions that is able to manage that somewhat. It would be great to actually get Solveig's and Lawrence's perspectives on that as well, actually.
Yeah, the floor is open.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the challenge was from Thomas.
No, it was more a question of
what's your challenge, Thomas?
Yeah, what are the practical ways that your thoughts, your guidelines of how to make sustainable AI can be implemented? What's the most effective way to get those in place, I guess, to rephrase?
Yeah, I think that I mentioned earlier that I think that a new path to a more human AI or human-inspired AI is correct way in so many respects, but it's also challenging because if AI becomes human in a way, just to draw it all the way to the artificial general intelligence level, as humans we have quite a lot of cognitive issues. And sorry, there was an AI talking to me here. But I think that we need to figure out how can we put up the right guidelines, the right legislations to handle kind of the new or the expanded autonomous properties of a more general AI. And that is a challenge because, for instance, morality, or if we have a continuously learning AI, as I also mentioned in the newspaper article, where we have fast learning, continuous learning AI, how can we limit, or how can we regulate the morality of such AI? And I think that whose morality should apply? Is it my morality, or is it American, or is it French morale, or Australian, or whatever?
Yes,
we need to agree upon this.
Yeah, we are rolling straight into the next audience question here, because what sort of implication will these agents have towards developing countries in the long run? Intelligence agents will have some implications in the developing world, and thank you so much for that question. Do any one of you want to answer that? It's quite a complex question. I'm not sure that we can answer all of it in one go, but any thoughts on this? Lawrence, perhaps you have some thoughts on this?
There are so many facets to this question, and I think it's not going to affect it just one way. It's going to affect it in many ways. But I can see, for example, related to food supplies, having better models for predicting the weather could help with both food and water supplies. It would optimize efficiency, at least in some areas where there's a need to spread the water and the food better in the developing world. I can think about traffic congestion, which I think can be a really big problem in some cities in the developing world, not just the developing world, also the global north. But AI can help there. And I would think the predictive capabilities of AI can be used in just so many ways. At the same time, since AI is normally created, most of it has been created in the global north. It has all the all the problems of discrimination or built-in discrimination that we know, both related to face recognition. I mean, there are so many problems that are embedded in the AI because of lack of diversity in the development. So it's not just one answer here.
I also cut in here, Alex.
Absolutely.
I think that Lars is touching upon so many areas where I think that we need some top-down control also here, because I think that if we pursue a road, a path towards more human-inspired AI, and more concept learning, AI transfer learning, and top-down learning, we may also perhaps within our reach have a tool for controlling or setting standards for how AI should be also top-down, instead of data cleaning in all respects, which is in fact impossible. To clean the data in all respect for all biases is a futile effort. But if we can, just as we regulate human activity, we can regulate AI activity if top down. I think that I think we need that kind of organ or kind of structure for that can regulate this top down.
Yes, I think this also relates to the current efforts by the European Commission with their recent proposal for regulating artificial intelligence and these high-risk applications, you know, and of course that will not kind of apply to every application, but within healthcare, within, I think I do believe that that your solutions might be touched by this as well, Thomas, to some extent, potentially as well. Even within like education for children, like there's a lot of notions now of like how we should manage AI in this kind of top-down way, at least in the EU, you know, from the European Commission more broadly. But Thomas, do you think like a small startup could make a plan for how they will address the sustainable development goals? I mean, I think it's a core part of your startup, because I remember seeing it from the very beginning on your website, on the earlier website as well, very strongly. So, but do you have a plan for this? Like, you know, is there are you addressing any of the indicators in the sustainable development goals? If so, which ones? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, we've looked into it. I mean, like I mentioned, SDG 14 is particularly relevant for us. But for us, it definitely has started with the company, the value of the people working there, and what we think is important. So we try to use that to guide the choices that we do make, both in terms of, you know, which customers we decide to work with, as well as how we build the model. But it's quite easily, it's quite easy to get distracted from that path, I guess, if you have, you know, suddenly a contract with some intelligence agency or whatever it could be, that yeah, it's quite tempting as a startup then to choose the path where there's more money involved, right? So and I'm not sure if regulation of the smaller startup is the solution either. Yeah, no, so it's again, it's the people that is making those choices at the moment, at least. And you know, we try to be aware of what biases that we build into the machine learning itself. Certainly, you know, we're training on ships mainly in the Norwegian oceans, in the Norwegian coast. It's actually harder for our model to detect ships in the Pacific because the colors are different, all that sort of thing, right? But the solution for us is then to, okay, if we get a customer in the Pacific, okay, then we'll make the decision to train that model. I think it's in the best interest of our customers as well that our model is open in terms of the biases it has and what they should be looking out for.
Yeah, I think what maybe is kind of challenging as well is that sustainability or environmental concerns is often optional, right? or like it's often an add-on. It's not required, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, in the new regulations from the EU, the word sustainability is relegated, right, to the code of conduct section, and it's an optional, it's a voluntary aspect, right? So, so kind of the foundation of building these solutions and pertaining to this, at least top-down, like you were discussing, Solveig, we have a taxonomy for sustainability that is becoming more, widespread, and they're attempting to kind of do this in the kind of investment vehicle. So this will be relevant for, I think, everyone that has a company, right? That's what they're trying in the EU. So, for example, if you are doing a lot of work, Thomas, on various aspects of sustainability that hits these metrics, then it will be relevant for you in terms of the investment vehicles, or at least quite a lot of investment vehicles that will consider you as a company that is viable to invest in. So that kind of plays a part here as well. So I do think there are kind of different efforts to address this, but it's very difficult. So I think, Lawrence, like, how do you relate your work to sustainability? Like, because I think, I think it's really inspiring to see kind of the wide range of research and then like the way that you are addressing this. But I would really like if you have an answer to that question.
It's a difficult question. I think that most of our work is related to social justice. Often, whether it's the welfare, helping the welfare state, getting better professions for the welfare state, whether it's gender equality, whether it's universal design of the technology that we have, so that everyone is and feels included, and getting diversity into technology at all levels. Sustainability is something that is an umbrella term for all this, and of course the environment is something that we should think a lot more about. So it's not just social and economic, but also environment sustainability. So I feel it's in the back of our mind all the time. It should be even more at the surface.
Yeah, so I think that we have a very relevant question for this from the audience about, can you say something about sustainable AI with regard to universal design, inclusion and diversity of users? Because that was a thought in your presentation. Could you expand a bit on that?
Well, the idea of universal design is very well thought out when it comes to the physical world, whether it's ramps and things like this. But we don't think so much about it in terms of technology, and whether it's AI or not AI, but more and more AI. Access to technology is becoming it's part of it's a human right. I mean, it should be equal access for everyone, and therefore we are working at getting a diversity of users and also a diversity of developers, so that the developers understand the users while they're developing and while they're designing and while they're imagining those products. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it gave a good partial answer. I don't think it's easy to answer it in a few minutes. So we are kind of closing quite soon this discussion because of time, but I felt like it's gone really quickly, a lot more quickly I feel than a lot of the other discussions, because this is something I'm really passionate about. But there's a question here. I think it's it's hard to answer, but can these developers of AI be trusted? I think I'm gonna direct that to you, Thomas. Like more broadly, well, it was a bigger question, but I'm just gonna.
Yeah. Would you trust me? I guess. Yeah. No. There definitely, I would assume there's nefarious actors in this regard, right? I mean, you can use AI for all sorts of applications. I'm sure the ransomware hackers are thinking about ways they can use this to get into accounts and all of that. It's probably been used already. I don't know. So just as AI is a tool for people, I think going back to Solveig's points of it's the humans behind the AI that decides what they want to use it for, right? So I don't think you'll be able to avoid bad, nefarious uses of it. I don't know. Have you looked more into that, Solveig? Maybe you have more of a perspective on that.
Well, this touches upon, of course, the equity SDG 10, and as Lawrence also been talking about, the availability of AI. AI is a powerful tool, but with great power comes great responsibility, as they say. So definitely if we need to regulate something, I think we should not regulate the methods. We should regulate the people behind the methods. And I think that there are kind of three types of people in the world. There are the developers, there are the users, and there are those who have no access to technology in a way. And I think we need to think about how we can improve access for the usage of AI for the benefit of the good for the whole world, for the benefit of sustainability. When it comes to developers, I think that also every nation and should have a possibility to do research in AI, to develop AI. But we need to ensure that the education of the people who use or develop AI is the high standard, so that we can avoid the backside of AI in a way as much as possible. And I think that the digital divide is also a topic which will be addressed at the ECOSOC high-level political forum in July, where they discuss the progress of the sustainable the Agenda 2030. And I hope that Norway could take a lead there.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. I think, do you have any kind of words as well to kind of wrap up this discussion?
I don't know if I can wrap up very much here, but I think education, as I think everyone here has said, is probably the key. And thinking education and awareness at all stages in life is probably the key to having citizens that care and that understand AI and understand the consequences of AI.
Thank you so much. And do you want to finish this, Thomas? Because you're the startup here. So
yeah, no, I think I agree with what is said. It comes down to the people making it. I do think there's certain things you can do in terms of regulation and providing guidelines. As a startup, obviously, it's hard to relate to 107 pages of text you need to get through, in addition to building the company and technology. So hopefully it's possible to boil it down to a few things we can check off, at least that we've made sure that we've thought about, as well as any tools that makes tests and verification of that we actually have done that is also helpful. So hopefully there's some room in the open source community here as well to build this tool set up.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for the discussion. This has been really valuable. I think for me, I really enjoyed the discussion. So, and I hope it was for the audience too. So thank you so much for participating.